Coach Jason Capson here. Coach Jason Capson here, and three stories for you today. First up, I want to talk about Stephane Matala. And you've heard me talk about this guy before, his incredible physique, his incredible structure, one of the best up-and-coming bodybuilders that I've seen in a very, very long time in classic physique. When you look at some of these photos from, some of the competitions, or I guess, I don't know if this is prior to a competition or post-competition, but he's in incredible shape. He has literally a perfect structure. And it reminds me of the 90s bodybuilders. And, back in the heyday of bodybuilding, which to me in the 90s, you look at the 90s bodybuilders, they had it all. They had size, they had structure, they had symmetry, they had conditioning, they had it all. And they didn't sacrifice their balance and symmetry for size alone, for the most part. And they came in tight, they came in condition, they had, beautiful structure. You look at this photo here, and it reminds me of Brian Buchanan. And if those of you who don't know who Brian Buchanan is, it's a blast from the past. But Brian Buchanan was known as having the smallest waist in all of professional bodybuilding. And I still think even to this day, no one even touches that thing. He was a freak of nature, and it was just incredible to see. And I think what happened over the years, and I think it started with Dorian and really went from there, where, size was winning a lot of shows and structure was kind of taking a back seat. And you had some guys that were winning professional bodybuilding shows that just had size and not really good structure. You had, even Phil Heath at one, one of the last Olympias that he won, his distended belly was really distracting, and it really was throwing people for a loop. And people were just saying, why are we avoiding it? In fact, Arnold Schwarzenegger was very vocal about the bellies in bodybuilding. And, we talk about Nick Walker all the time, and we've got a story coming up about Nick with regards to that. And it's just one of those things. I don't know if it's genetics. I don't know if it's GH or insulin, whatever the case is, this distended belly thing that got out of control. I think for the most part, it's in control a little bit more now, what they're looking for. In today's bodybuilding, if you look at the winners over the last year or so. And I think the judges are loud and clear at this point with what they're looking for in men's open bodybuilding. You look at Samson Dauda. Yes, he's a gigantic. He's a 300-pound bodybuilder, but he carries it beautifully. His structure is flawless. He's got incredible symmetry and balance. And when you look at Stephane Matala, now, the issue with Stefan, and again, those of you that have been following, you know that Stefan, if you look at his Instagram, it's stefan.nfc. If you want to follow along and look at Stefan, he's decided to switch to open bodybuilding. Now, he's qualified for the Olympia in classic physique and didn't compete at the Olympia. And in his words, it was because he had such a hard time making the weight. The weight cut was too hard for him. And so he's decided to go into open bodybuilding. And these latest updates from Stefan are showing him he's just monstrous. He just looks huge. And, genetically speaking, this guy has it all. He's got incredible round muscle bellies, his shoulders, his chest, his arms, his legs, he's got it all. And, when you look at, again, some of the shots from classic physique where, okay, he was struggling to make weight, and that's why he decided, because it was, hard on his health, which is interesting because if making weight for classic physique was hard on your health, I hate to see what going into open does to your health, but that's a story for another day. I'm very impressed with Stefan. I think Stefan is one of the best bodybuilders that hasn't competed in the Olympia. I think he's one of the best up-and-coming bodybuilders, and I think we need to keep a real close eye on him. I think he's got it all. He seems to be a very humble bodybuilder. Kind of reminds me of Chris Bumstead a little bit that way, but his structure is just flawless, and he seems to be able to get into great shape, great conditioning. If he can put on the size that he needs, which it looks like he's doing, in open bodybuilding, and then he can come in that kind of condition that he had in classic physique, we've got a future champion in the making right here. I think that, again, this is someone to really keep an eye on. And again, we're looking at the open bodybuilding and what's happening in open bodybuilding. And you look at the guys that are winning. Again, Samson is a great example. You look at Martin Fitzwater. You look at, a lot of the guys that are at the top of the food chain right now. A lot of the guys that are making the noise in open bodybuilding, their physiques look very, very different than they did in the past. These are guys with great structure, great symmetry and balance, and they've got the size as well, but they're not sacrificing size over everything, which brings me to the next story. Nick Walker. Do I think Nick Walker is done? No, I don't think he's done. Do I think he's done winning at the top levels? Yes. I think Nick Walker is one of those examples of size over everything that is just not working. Now, granted, just from a structure standpoint, just from a genetic standpoint, Nick just doesn't have a body that is pleasing to the eye. Now, his 1.5 million followers on Instagram are going to hate me more than ever for saying this, but Nick he's a mutant, and that's a great nickname for him. He is a mutant, and I think it's because we love to see the mass monsters, but I think the mass monsters at all costs. I think there's a segment of the population that love that, and it's fun to watch, and I love watching his videos. I love watching him, with all of his size, but his structure. Again, when you look at some of the other bodybuilders that you would compare Nick to that are similar in height, similar in size, guys like, again, you look at Hadi, you look at Derek, those guys, they both won Mr. Olympia, and they have the size, but they also have the structure. They also have the balance and the symmetry. Now, I personally think Derek is getting very close to spilling over. I actually think Hadi has a better structure than Derek at this point. But again, you compare that to Samson, neither one of them even come close as far as a structure, from a structure standpoint and from a symmetry and a balance standpoint. And Nick Walker, I'm just going to say it, he will never win Mr. Olympia. At least he shouldn't. He should never win the Mr. Olympia based on the criteria that most fans want when they're looking at a Mr. Olympia. You got to have it all, and Nick doesn't have it all. He's got size and speed. He's got so much size, but he doesn't have the symmetry. He doesn't have the balance. He doesn't have that look that is pleasing to the eye. And if you look at what just happened in the Prague Pro, Chris Bumstead finishing second in open bodybuilding, beating some incredible bodybuilders to do that, by the way. The reason Chris finished second was because of his structure, because of he had size with symmetry and balance and condition. He had it all. And I think that is a sign for the future. I think that is what people are looking for the future. I think the Nick Walker look is never going to win the Mr. Olympia. In fact, I don't even think he has a chance to win the Arnold Classic based on who we've seen that is going into it and who we know that's going to show up at the Arnold Classic. We could have some surprises there too. I know, Nick's Strength and Power mentioned that, Nick Walker has to compete at the Arnold Classic. I don't think if the New York Pro is going to help him from a standpoint of he lost a lot of momentum over the last year. It was a really tough year for Nick, pulling out of the Olympia for the second year in a row. For last year was different. I mean, he tore his hamstring. That, you got to give him props for fighting back from that and coming back and looking pretty good at the New York Pro. It wasn't his best look ever, but he won the New York Pro in 2024, qualified for the Olympia, and then pulled the plug on the Olympia. And, I know a lot of people want to blame Matt Jansen for that. I don't think Matt Jansen, again, I said in a previous video, nobody tells Nick Walker what to do. Matt Jansen didn't force Nick Walker out of the Mr. Olympia. Nick Walker pulled out of the Mr. Olympia. And he is the one that has to be held accountable for that. There's no one else. You can't blame Matt Jansen for what Nick Walker ended up looking like or why he pulled out of the Mr. Olympia. And there's still a lot of speculation. The bottom line, he wasn't in shape. That's it, the end. And it happens. It's bodybuilding. But you still show up. You still show up whether you think you can win or not. You still show up. You do your best. You get on that stage. If he finishes 5th or 10th, it doesn't matter. He gets on that stage. But I think Nick is destined to be a mid 5th, 6th, 7th place bodybuilder from now on. I don't think he has a chance at cracking the top 3 at the Olympia. I don't think he's got a chance to win the Arnold Classic. He might win the New York Pro again, maybe. But I think Nick Walker is on the other side of things, and I just don't think he's got the structure, and I don't think he ever will, unless he, takes some time off and completely changes his structure, which I don't think he can. I don't think he will ever have a chance at winning the Mr. Olympia. That blocky waist is just his whole body, the whole build is blocky. I mean, he's built like a fire hydrant, and again, as a mutant, that's fantastic. Just from a freak standpoint, I mean, will Nick ever have problem making money off of that body? No. Is he going to have a ton of sponsors and a lot of fans that love him? Absolutely. I think Nick's great, but I'm just talking strictly from a competitive bodybuilding standpoint only. From a judging criteria in men's open bodybuilding, the way it's being judged right now, Nick Walker will never win the Mr. Olympia. Now, speaking of Mr. Olympia, we go on to Chris Bumstead. CBUM really made some noise at the Prague Pro. Do I think he deserved to win? No. I think it was perfectly fine that Martin Fitzwater won the Prague Pro. Would it have been cool to see Chris Bumstead win it? Yes. I'm Chris Bumstead's #1 fan. I'm a fellow Canadian. I've known Chris Bumstead for a long, long, long time. I met him before he was Mr. Olympia. And again, just a great, humble, incredible champion, a once-in-a-lifetime champion. I mean, we put Chris Bumstead on the same level as the best of the best that ever lived. We cannot put Chris Bumstead on any other level other than Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman. You've got to have him at the top of the food chain. He is the greatest classic physique Mr. Olympia champion ever. No one will ever compare. He is the standard. Now, do I think he's retired forever? No. He's retired now. And I think it's great that he went out on his shield. I think it's great that he competed one last time. I think that it's great that he came in as an open bodybuilder and went out as an open bodybuilder. And I think him and Hani retiring at the same time is fantastic. I think that's beautiful. And I think Chris will go home. And I think he'll spend time with Courtney and the baby. And I think he'll focus on his companies for a little while. And then he will have to come back to bodybuilding, because a champion mindset never goes away. This is what he is. Chris Bumstead doesn't do bodybuilding. He is bodybuilding. And it's like I say, bodybuilding isn't something that you do. Bodybuilding is something that you are. And it's something that you are for the rest of your life if you're truly a bodybuilder. It never goes away. And Chris Bumstead will not be able to stay away from the bodybuilding world for any length of time. Do I think he'll come back next year? No. Do I think he'll take a couple years off? Yeah. Would it be amazing if he hooked up with Ian and Ian was his coach again and brought him back to the open bodybuilding and he competed at the Mr. Olympia in the open bodybuilding class? You add 25 pounds to Chris Bumstead's frame. You have that body and add 25 pounds. You put him at 275 pounds with that kind of conditioning, as long as he keeps control of his waist and he has that just 25 pounds from head to toe balanced on that frame. With that conditioning, with that symmetry, you've got an unstoppable force. You've got someone who can really compete at the highest levels in open. You've got someone who could beat Samson Dauda. You just do. Samson comes in at 300 pounds. Chris at 275, I think, beats Samson Dauda just because of his structure. He needs work on his back, as everybody knows, to go in open bodybuilding. But not that much. It really wasn't, Martin's back won the show. Let's be honest. Martin was not in the best shape of his life. He was better at the Mr. Olympia. He was a little bit off. But even a little bit off Martin Fitzwater should beat a classic physique Chris Bumstead, even though Chris looked the best he's ever looked in any competition at the Prague Pro. I think he looked incredible. Did I think he should win? I would have loved to have seen him win. I was surprised that the judges, I thought he won the morning show. I thought he really did a great job in the morning show. I was really surprised to see that no judges, none, in the morning or the night, the finals or the prejudging, none of them had him in first place at either. And I was surprised by that. I thought at least maybe one or two of the judges would have had him in first place and then Martin winning the night show. But it is what it is. Chris Bumstead finished second. He's retired for now. I, like all of you, am a huge fan of Chris Bumstead. Do I want to see him come back? Absolutely. Do I think we will see him come back? Yes, I do. Do I think we'll see him come back in classic? No. He will come back in open bodybuilding. I think he will come back in a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. And I think he will step on stage as a brand new version of Chris Bumstead, freak of nature, to prove once again that he is one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, period. Never mind like what division, he will go down in history as one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, period. His name will be mentioned in the same breath as the King, Ronnie Coleman, as Arnold Schwarzenegger, all of the greatest champions of all time, all the greatest champions in Mr. Olympia history, Flex Lewis, you take all of them. Chris Bumstead is at the top of the food chain. And I, for one, am really looking forward to seeing him come back because I think we will see that. That's it. That's all for today, folks. Coach Jason Capson signing out.